Welcome, everyone, to our October monthly weather roundup. I'm Chief Meteorologist Joe Martucci at Triax57. Joined with me, as we will see every month, my weather dad, and more importantly, the New Jersey State Climatologist, Dr. Dave Robinson. Boy, do we have a lot to talk about. I mean, we joke that we can fill a half hour if we lived in a vacuum. But I mean, I don't even know where we can begin with this. It felt more like Los Angeles than New Jersey this month. We're going to get into all of it.
Yeah.
First of all, though, it's Halloween. I'm in short sleeves. You're in short sleeves. I was at the beach today, literally in a bathing suit. It just adds to the month. I'm just going to turn it over to you. You go. How do you feel about October and
Well, we
Halloween?
don't have a lot of rainstorms to talk about, so some respects it could be a short.
That's true. Good point.
But no, truly and seriously, it's been a remarkable month, and really the past 2 months. Bone Dry will be the title of my narrative for October. There are many parts of New Jersey that didn't see more than a drop or two of rain, if that, this month. Unmeasurable. A few areas squeezed out a few hundredths. Woodbine, one station down there, had a whole tenth of an inch.
Ooh.
Same for a station up in near High Point. So the extreme ends of the state had a whopping 5 hundredths to a tenth of an inch. But when you put it all together, this was New Jersey's driest month of any month in the last 130 years.
I was wondering, and I saw you said it was possible it was going to be the driest month ever. I figured October was a shoo-in. So we're talking, I don't know how many months, maybe you know off the top of your head, how many months since 1895 to now do we have? I mean, it's got to be over. It's going to be.
1,558.
Thank you, thank you. I'm glad you counted there for us here. So number
Yeah.
one out of 1,058.
No,
Oh,
1,558.
didn't mean to shortchange it. 1,558. So it's a one. I mean, it's less than a one. You're in the top less than 1%. I mean, less
One
than
tenth
point
of a
one
percent.
tenth of a percent with this. So let
Yep.
me just to clarify though, are you saying Woodbine did have the most rain in the state for the month of October out of 10?
Right.
Wow.
Along with Wantage. I think it was Wantage or one of the just small towns up in Sussex County.
Okay. And
Um,
and were there places that saw zero rain
oh,
in the month? Many.
many
Okay.
locations, including my backyard. Well, traces. I had to look for a couple raindrops on my back steps one morning last week. I saw on radar that something had come through and I went looking. Nothing was wet, but I could tell because it had been so dry that there had been raindrops on the dust
Yeah.
of my back steps. Really, truly remarkable. And remember, we're talking back to 1895. We're
Yeah.
talking 130 years of record. The state's probably going to come in at point oh 0.01 or a hundredth or 200ths of an inch for the month. The record we've now broken
Yeah.
was a quarter of an inch. And that
Wow.
in October, but we're talking any month of the year. It was October 1963 had 0.25 inches for the month. And that now is number two. Not only that,
There's
but
more.
people may remember that September was the third driest September on record at 0.83 inches. Add the 100th that we estimate for this month, the 0.84 is the driest of any back to back 2 month period on record in New Jersey, going back to 1895. The record had been 1.35 inches in December of 1980 and January of 1981 combined. So we broke that record by about a half an inch. You can't make
Incredible.
stuff up. It truly is incredible. And I started by saying it's serious because we are now in the throes of a substantial drought situation, which has produced forest fires, has lowered groundwater levels, reservoir levels. It's impacting late season agriculture, which can have an impact on next spring's fruit blossoms and such for blueberries and cranberries and apples and peaches, for instance. There's a lot of serious ramifications. The only good news, if you want to say there's some good news out of this, is it's October and not June or
Yeah.
July in the beginning or midst of the growing season, in which case it would be a lot more worrisome, a lot more quickly.
Just with drought here, and you're on the committee, should we say that gives us our drought status in the state of New Jersey. These are the numbers I pulled from Halloween. You can obviously correct me if I'm wrong, but 100% of the state is in some form of drought. The last time that happened was in 2012. And then we also have 54% of the state in a severe drought, which, according to what I saw, was the first time we've had that since 2002. And that even rings a bell for me. I was young then, but I remember there was a really pretty significant drought in that summer 2002 with water restrictions and everything. Again, during the summer, not during the fall. But I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, I really no other way to put it. It's incredible. It's dangerous, like you said. The wildfires. I mean, I think we've gotten a little lucky on the wildfire front. Personally, we haven't seen anything huge. We have had wildfires spark up, of course,
Yep.
but no big wildfires. In fact, the red flag warnings that the National Weather Service issue for high fire risk days um, in their period of record keeping, which only goes back to 2006, but they never issued a red flag warning in climatological, excuse me, in climatological autumn, September, October, November here. Just to give you another stat on how incredible this dry streak is.
This is a tinderbox, folks. Um, we're putting more litter, more fuel onto the floor every day as trees lose their leaves. The deciduous trees lose their leaves. The grasses have gone dormant, and that they lose their water content. That makes them more flammable. We have been very fortunate because it's been so dry, not just the surface, but the atmosphere. We've had several days with a fair amount of wind, and all it's going to take is a spark for these 50 and 100 and at best 200-acre fires to just explode into something more serious. So we desperately need some soaking rains, um, wet that fuel
Yeah.
and reduce the danger of fire. This is as I said, a worrisome situation. I might add that that drought, U.S. drought monitor you were talking about, only began around 2002.
Okay.
So we don't have records going back further for that map.
Right.
And 2002, you remember correctly, was the last time New Jersey was in a drought emergency with massive water restrictions. It began to rear its ugly head back in 1998 and got kind of progressively worse,
Hmm.
interrupted Floyd for a month in 1999. But '01 and '02 were the worst of that drought period. And we've had nothing like it since. And we're not there at this point, I
Okay.
might.
That was
This
gonna be my next question.
this isn't a flash drought, which you can get in 1 month in a dry, rainless, hot July. It's a little longer than that. It has its origins really back last spring, and precipitation, particularly in South Jersey, has been below normal since. In North and Central Jersey, there was a very wet early August that brought more than an August's worth of rain in the first 10 days of the month. And that was a saving grace that's keeping North Jersey in moderate drought and as compared to South Jersey, where we can call it extreme drought or severe drought. I'm not a fan of the nomenclature, but suffice it to say, things are a little bit worse in the South. The drought, I've also, and we do make recommendations, a small group of colleagues from the National Weather Service, my office, and NJDEP. I gather them every early week and I send them information. I send them draft recommendations of what we submit to the national author of the national lower 48 drought map for the week. And that author most often takes our recommendation, has to merge it with guess estimations and mapping in Delaware and Maryland and Pennsylvania and New York. And in fact, in recent weeks, my recommendations get sent to the national author, but also the state climatologist of New York, Pennsylvania, and Delaware, just so we all are sort of on the same page, because that's where the real centroid of this coastal drought is right now. Out in West Virginia and southeastern Ohio, things have been worse longer, so they're even in worse shape. But we're now the two worst areas for drought, pretty much east of the Mississippi, although some parts in the south are a little worse off. The Midwest has been bad, but they're getting some pretty good rains the last couple of days as the pattern begins to relax, if you will. But we can talk about that later, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah, I was going to get to that. I have a question for you. I'm looking at the United States drought monitor map, and it looks like, would it be fair to say a good portion of the lower 48 is just dry? I mean, I see all these colors
Oh
on the map.
yeah.
I don't know what the percentage is right now, but it does look like the United States is just kind of in a dry spell. Even Hawaii's in drought. I know. I'm just looking.
Yeah, I got the percentages in an email from the author of this week's map earlier today. And the vast majority of the country is either abnormally dry or in some stage of drought. And it's rare in the history of this drought monitor. This is about as bad as it has looked when you look at it in a broad geographic sense. There's some hope. He just sent out, this author is also going to be next week's author, and he just sent out the precip estimates for the next 7 days and spoke to the fact he may have to get his eraser out in the central part of the country, eliminating some of the or reducing the drought. If we're at a D2, you don't go to a D0 or D, what I call D nada, in 1 week. Unless it's a deluge, you might come down 2 categories. But that also is predicated on stream flow and groundwater, not just what falls in the rain gauge. So it's frowned upon to go down more than 1 category per week. So
Yeah.
we're going to be in this for a while. I dare say the next step would be to go to D3. That's something that only happens every 20 to 50 years. Um, and that would be probably focused over the Pinelands, where all of this kind of began back several months ago. That was the first area to go to D0, then to D1, and then to D2. And we're really, I'd say we're about at D3 level there. Should no substantial precipitation fall by next Tuesday, and it's not going to.
Yeah.
Um, what we do in North Jersey, introducing D2 instead of D1, we'll have to look at some of the indicators, but it's pretty serious. And there will be a meeting of so we're talking about the U.S. drought monitor, but there's also the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection has a drought watch out now
Right.
for the state. It's been out 2 weeks ago today. And that is going to be evaluated. We have a meeting next week because I sit on that committee, which is mainly an NJDEP committee with, I'm invited, gratefully invited into it. And then the discussion will be where to go next. Next would be a drought warning, not an emergency, a drought warning. And that's a more formal designation and could involve restrictions for water use. Not flip a switch and all these restrictions come into place. They're often worked into place, if not for the whole state, for about a half dozen regions within the state. Um, my guess is it would be almost uniform
Right.
because the whole state's feeling it. But that wouldn't occur next week because there has to be a hearing process to that public announcement of a hearing. So we'd still be a couple of weeks away from that at a minimum. Or at this time of the year, it might just be let's wait and see. Let's wait and see a couple more weeks. But if major fires break out, I think that would push the envelope a little bit. And looking at reservoir levels, they have finally, just in the last couple of weeks, fallen below normal. Normally, they're at their minimum for the year in October, as we've used a lot of water. The plants have used a lot of water. We people have used a lot of water, and they start filling. The reservoirs and the groundwater starts filling as we head towards next spring. So we still have time to refill our reservoirs, but the lower they get before the rains finally resume is going to make them more difficult to achieve their mark for next spring, which would introduce concerns right at the beginning of the growing season next year. So we still have some time,
Right. Yeah,
but
and God, sorry, you finish.
no, we still have some time, but with every day that clicks off the calendar, it becomes a little more worrisome.
And we touched on this in the September weather roundup, which was, if there's a time of year for us to be like this is probably the best time of the year because we have the end of the, now it's late October, it's the end of the growing season. We have the winter where things are dormant. We have time for nor'easters and coastal storms and whatever, to bring us rain. Or as some people have joked with me, is our next precipitation going to be snow? Uh, you know, Maybe. But more than likely, to answer your question from a few minutes ago, it does look like we're going to get some rain at the I'm sorry, the second full weekend of November. So after Election Day, I don't know if it's going to be a lot because we've really seen these cold fronts come through and they weaken before they bring anything. But there does look to be some tropical moisture floating around with the low pressure system. It's too early for details. So far, these cold fronts have come. They haven't brought anything. We're going to need probably a tropical system or a coastal storm to say it's definitely going to rain. So we're right. Bam. Now, we'll end with this. I just want to read off some dry streaks that we've had. So this is places in New Jersey without measurable precipitation. So if you had a few drops on your windshield, it didn't collect in the rain gauge, it doesn't count. And that's what I had last Thursday. I think you had the same thing. I had a few drops on my windshield. I joked on social media, drought was over. It very far away from that. Anyway, so this is as of Halloween when we're recording this. Newark has the record. They actually broke the record a couple of days ago for the longest dry streak at 32 days. Our cooperative station in Long Branch, Oakhurst in Monmouth County tied the record today at 31 days. And then I'll just read off some others. Trenton, 33 days. Belvedere in northwest corner of the state, 31 days. Millville in Cumberland County, 32. Atlantic City International Airport, the shortest one at only 29 days. And then ACY at 30. All of these are in the top 5. More than likely, I mean, let's just say definitely. Millville, Belvedere, Trenton, ACY Airport are going to have the record. The question is, will Atlantic City, which needs another 9 days from now to get the record, will they do that? Yeah, he's shaking his head. No, records go back to 1874. There, that's a big thing. That's a
Yeah.
huge period of record. But it does look like most of these places in the state are going to break the record, and I said at the top, it kind of feels like Los Angeles or San Diego out there. I mean, I don't know if you could answer this. I know I'm gonna put you on the spot here, but like the amount of average rain that we had this month in New Jersey, like, could you give me a good comparison for where else in the country it's typically this dry in October?
Rain-free, you'd have to look to the Southwest, where the monsoon season is essentially over. But don't look to New Mexico because there was major flash flooding with 5 to 6 inches of rain in Roswell, New Mexico, a couple of weeks ago. But you would look to Southern California, Southern Arizona. There's really no place, parts of Nevada, that southwestern desert, semi-arid region but even there, to come up shooting blanks, if you will, for the month is somewhat unusual, but
Got it.
far from unprecedented. Other
Right.
places you could look, some parts of Texas, and in extreme situations, they've seen it all the way up through the Great Plains, but it's not on a regular basis.
Right.
So, you have to be careful with these station records, and you alluded to it with the period of record. Some periods of records are 60 years, some like Atlantic City Marina are 150 years.
Yeah.
And that will make a difference. So that's always the first question you should ask.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I will say though, I mean, the Newark record and the Long Branch record, they go back
Oh
more
yeah.
than
Oh
not
yeah.
150, but they're legit. I would say they're legitimate
Oh,
records.
no question.
Yeah,
Once you're over 30 days, you're starting to knock on record-breaking
right,
territory.
right.
And you get up to 40. I went looking. I don't think I found any at 40. I found some in the upper 30s.
Yeah,
But
I'm with you. I didn't look everywhere, but that AC one in Atlantic City, 39 was the longest that I saw.
yeah, yeah,
All right,
yeah.
let's take a break. We went over on the first half, but I wanted to because this is the story. But we're gonna come back. We're gonna talk temps. We'll talk about these big swings in temperatures and maybe a little bit about winter. We'll see. We'll be back with you in just a minute here with our October weather roundup. And we are back with our October weather roundup. I am here with New Jersey State Climatologist Dr. Dave Robinson. You can find new episodes just around the turn of every month as we recap the month that was. All right, we're going to get away from the dry weather. We'll talk about the, we'll say warm weather. We'll get to it though. Not as extreme as our dry weather. You're shaking your head. I understand that. Generally, where did we end up for temperatures for the month? And just tell me, because I think there's going to be a difference between the highs and the low temperatures as well, right?
Oh, absolutely. We're going to average close to 2 degrees above normal for the month, maybe a little below that. South a little less above normal than the north, interestingly enough, but it's going to rank somewhere around the 20th or so, 25th warmest October, going back 130 years. So we're in the top 25%, but we know how much New Jersey has been warming. So, nothing too remarkable. But what you alluded to was what we call the diurnal temperature range, the difference between the daily high and the daily low. And all you have to do is look at that range. And we don't have the full numbers yet, but it's probably going to come in instead of usually it's around 20, 21 degrees. It's probably going to be about 25, 26 degrees. And as soon as you see that in any historic records, you go dry because that means the ground's dry, so you don't have any evaporative fluxes adding warmth to the atmosphere. You have limited cloud cover, so the heat of the day can escape at night. So we've had some impressive diurnal temperature ranges that have gone into the 50 plus degree category in some of the pinelands, also some of the valleys of Northwest Jersey.
Our
That's
friend,
pretty remarkable.
yeah,
Go
our
ahead.
friend Nick Stefano, I'm sure he texted you. He texted me. I think it was 51 in Layton in Sussex County, one of those days there. I was just going to bring up some specific numbers on the 20th and 21st. ACY Airport in Egg Harbor Township, so on the cusp of the Pine Barrens, like you were saying, on the 21st, had a 40-degree temperature difference going from 42 to 82 degrees. That was the most in an October day and the most in climatological fall, September, October, November. The day before that was a 38-degree difference, third most in October, third highest in climatological fall. And I'll give you one more here, and you can add whatever else you want to add. But at Monmouth Executive Airport, up the shore, KBLM is what the station code is. The 38-degree difference on the 21st, 44 in the morning, 82 in the afternoon, was the most in October history on record. So 1954, it was the third most for climatological fall. So really impressive temperature swings. I'm in Monmouth County. It was cold those it was cold those mornings. You're like, wait, what happened? It felt a little bit more like spring, like May, where you have that chill and then
Yeah.
it warms up quick, but the sun is not as strong, much weaker than May.
Yeah, no, they've been impressive, and you do get further inland. That's really impressive for being within miles of the coast. You go inland, I think that 20th or 21st, there were a half dozen of stations in our weather network that were over 50 degrees for diurnal.
Yeah,
They started around 30 and they ended around 80 or upper 20s to the
sure.
low 80s.
Yeah.
Just and it's indicative of the very, very dry conditions, not a cold front coming through as we might in the winter and see it go from 45 degrees down near zero.
Right.
We sometimes see that, but this wasn't an air mass change associated with this. This was just a very dry, stable air mass, which is just the problem we have with this ridge of high pressure. You have clear skies, you have colder nights, and the nights are longer now, and you have your warm days. Plus, that ridge of high pressure doesn't allow the storms in here. It didn't allow Helene to come up here in late September or Milton to make a turn up the coast in early October. And a few storms out west went over top of us into northern New England or into eastern Canada. So we've got this blockade here with beautiful weather.
Oh yeah.
Tourism industry loves this.
Yep.
The agricultural industry, not so much.
Yeah, there's winners and obviously losers with this, of course, when you have this long of streak. Um, Let me ask you this real quick: Are what's going to make the top 10 weather events list? And how high is this dry streak going to be? Do we know yet?
My
Is it
son,
one?
actually, my weather geek son, texted me this morning. He says, "Dad, this is gonna be the top 10. This is gonna be number 1 for the year." And my response was, "Unless we get a late November hurricane or a December major blizzard,
Right.
this will be number 1. It'll be hard to press it out of number 1 because of the magnitude.
Yeah.
Fortunately, so far, not the broad length of it, but more just how intense it's been for a good 60 plus day period."
Sure. We have about a minute left, and then you can end, the last 30 seconds here. But in a minute, I just want to turn to winter real quick. We're going to have a winter special on Triax 57. We spoke with our friend Judah Cohen about this. Judah's great. Steve DiMartino from NYNJPA Weather. Just what are you thinking? I know you don't put out a winter forecast, but, in a minute, just what are your thoughts as we go into winter?
A somewhat modest La Nina situation likely to unfold. The storm track through the Great Lakes, fewer coastal storms that generally leads to less precipitation than normal, milder conditions, and less snow. If you want snow and La Nina, go to central and northern New England. There, while it's a little warmer than normal, it's still cold enough to snow, and they'll have the moisture. Down this way, it's tough to pop major snowstorms during a La Nina winter. So I would say, if I was going to stick my neck out now, a somewhat milder and less snowy winter than normal. And I'm a little nervous about it perhaps being a little drier than normal as well, which is something clearly we don't want to think about.
Yeah, we definitely don't. And just as a teaser, what you said is pretty similar to what our other guests have said about the winter so far. So stay tuned for that, everyone. All right, I'll leave the last 30 seconds to you. What's going on at the New Jersey Weather and Climate Network, and tell everyone where they can follow you.
You can find us at njweather.org or go to our weather network station, a group of stations at njweather.org. We've upgraded a station a couple weeks ago up at Walpack, our coldest nighttime station in Jersey. We're still working on a couple possible stations, but invite everyone. It's publicly available and updated every 5 minutes. And then we have our wonderful CoCoRaHS citizen science volunteers who are immensely useful, not just when it rains, but when it doesn't rain.
Yeah.
Uh, One adage is be a hero, report your zeros. Because it's very important that
Yes.
we know where it hasn't rained.
Yeah.
Because, the next time around, when the media contacts me a couple weeks, hopefully, if not a couple months from now, it's not, how's the drought? It's going to be, is the drought over? Um,
Right.
so
Yes.
you go through, are we getting into drought? We're into drought. Is the drought over? It's been a very busy time in the office talking to the media, which is so important to get the message out. So
Uh,
please conserve water.
As always, a big thank you to New Jersey State Climatologist, Dr. Dave Robinson, my weather dad, for joining me for our monthly weather roundups. Thanks for watching the reboot of this after doing this at the Press of Atlantic City for a number of years. It's good to be back with you on Triax doing the same. We will be back with you around the end of November into early December with the latest on November's weather roundup. And maybe, hopefully, by then it'll be a wetter, maybe even a whiter month. Have a happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Have a great month ahead, and we'll talk to you soon on our monthly weather roundup. You can find this on track57.com or on our social media pages. Take care, everybody.